victim, okay, we're recording it, for the victim, there is a chance for them to make what is called a personal or victim personal statement. And this outlines how they've been impacted, and we've discussed the sort of ways that a crime might impact you. And this victim personal statement is taken into account when they do the sentencing. It allows the offender to hear how their crime has affected others. It allows the victim to feel part of the process. However, despite this, the court process is not really about the victim. The reason that they've said it allows the victim to feel part of the process is because the victim is almost incidental to the crime. The whole thing, when you go to court, is about prosecuting the person who committed the crime, proving beyond reasonable doubt that they've done the deed, and ensuring they have received the correct punishment. And so in court, it's offender focused. I've got a quote from old Ronnie Reagan. So admittedly, this is US based, but this was probably true for many places when he said it in the 80s. For too long, the victims of crime have been the forgotten persons of our criminal justice system. So there's been great strides made in trying to address this. And the question is, what process can be put in place when things, to make things about the person harmed, the victim, not the harmer, the offender? Well, that process, part of that process is restorative justice. And restorative justice is not about punishment. It's not about sentencing. It's about relationships. And unlike the court process, it's very much victim focused. It's about addressing what the victim has gone through and how they might experience restoration. And there's a whole thing there, and Princess Anne is the patron for the Restorative Justice Council. And as she says here, restorative justice enables us to build the empathy, trust, and understanding we need to strengthen our relationships with each other. It's used in several areas: schooling, mental health. I'm involved more in the criminal justice side here on the island. And on that note, I'm going to show you a short video. It just needs to come out and go back in again. A short video that looks at that a bit. So bear with me while I set it up. Here we go. No, I didn't like that. Right. Make sure you can hear. Can you see that?
Yeah.
A single act of crime can affect someone long after it happens. The mind replays it endlessly, warping what really happened and consuming our thoughts. No one can undo what happened, but there is a simple process which 85% of victims of crime said helped. Restorative justice is a process through which victims can meet their offender. It allows them to ask questions, have their say, and move on with their lives. Help us spread the word about restorative justice. You never know who it may help in the future. Restorative justice works. Share this film and help us spread the word.
Okay, so they've explained basically what the restorative justice process is about. It gets the victim and the perpetrator, the offender, in the same room together. And that face-to-face meeting can be for very serious crimes. So the parents of someone who's been murdered and the murderer, for example, the victim of an assault, physical or sexual or otherwise, in the same room together. And the whole process is voluntary, so you can't force either party to do it. So both parties, the harmer and the harmed, need to be prepared to follow it through. It's carried out by trained facilitators, and as facilitators, you're taught, do not take sides. So ideally, you want to aim for this, what they call a conference, where they meet, but sometimes it comes down to people exchanging letters. So a case that I'm involved with at the moment, the offender and the victim are just exchanging emails, or we deliver the emails, they don't get sent directly. But it all depends upon what the victim wants. And as I said, this is victim focused. So it depends on what the victim wants, but it also depends on how much the offender is prepared to get into the process. The other thing is, as you saw with that, those people sat around in the circle, you don't turn up on your own by and large. You have someone with you. So you have supporters. Both the offender and the victim have supporters there as they go through the process. And sometimes there's been cases where one of the supporters has been, for example, the offender's father, if it's someone in their 1920 or something, and the offender's father gives them a right good going over in the meeting. So when we say supporter, sometimes it's not so much supporter as they are taking sides, having heard what happens. And what's really interesting about the meeting, when you sit down as facilitators, you introduce each party, and you just come out and you just say it as plain as possible. Here is Jack physically assaulted Jill, and this is Jill, she's the victim, and she was physically assaulted by Jack. You lay it out there on the table, what the crime is, what the issue is, really kind of raw and just out there, which is interesting, I think. So the victim gets to face their attacker, gets to face the person that's violated them in some way. What might be the benefits of that process, do you think, for the victim?
It probably allows them to have closure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I also see it as a way, and George is correct there, it's in line with forgiveness. Somebody has done you wrong, and it's very hard sometimes, depending on the nature of the crime, to forgive that person. But I like the idea of having the perpetrator in front of you, and it's like a healing process, forgiveness.
Adrian, sorry, Glenn.
No, you carry on.
I was just going to say, it's nice for us to find out why the other person did it. What was going through their head at the time.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think it also gives both parties a chance to see the other side of the coin for each other. Maybe, offer a chance to express or to say sorry to the victim, while the victim also assesses to say, is it genuine? Can they see it through them? Is it coming from their heart? And can they accept to forgive them? I think it's in the line with what Peter said. and what Barry said.
Glyn, did you have anything to add?
Well, yeah, I was going to say similar, that that it's getting into the other person's moccasins and see what makes them tick and how you've really influenced, affected them, what has really gone on in that person's mind. You are looking at it as an outsider, whether you're the perpetrator or the victim. It's a different viewpoint, and so you have to try and explain what your circumstances were and how it's influenced you. It may be the very environment in which you're in. It may have been the upbringing, the culture that you live, but you have an opportunity to express to the other person what is actually going on, as Pathias and and others have said.
So yeah, for sure, good answers. So sometimes the victim just wants an apology. Sometimes they want money to pay for the fence that has been vandalized, or if property's been vandalized. And through the restorative justice process, you can get them to sign off to say, I'm going to pay whatever it is, £10 a month towards your costs that you've incurred. Yeah, the why me question. What was it about me that made me a potential victim? In what way did I look vulnerable? Why did you target me and not someone else? And the reason we ask those questions is we want to ensure that it won't happen again. It also, we can humanize the harmer. There was the case of someone who had a connection to a violent offence, and before they met him, they had built this chap up into some sort of supervillain. He became a terrifying monster in their eyes, a bit related to the video I showed you. But when they did eventually meet him, they found he was, and this is their words, not mine, they found he was a pathetic little old balding man. No longer a monster, now just yeah, pathetic in their eyes. That was their description. And also it brings closure. It allows people to start moving on with their lives. So I know that some people that have been not going out of their house because of what they've been through, if they go through the process, they can now go out of their house. So it's a very much, and what attracted me to this whole process is very healing for the victim. And I think we as Christians need to be about healing. I think it's a very important thing. Now we might go over time. Is that okay, Peter? I'm just going to show you another video. Adrian, is that all right?
Adrian, yeah, that's fine. I've spoken to Frida, was meant to be doing a program tonight. It's not going to go ahead now, so you can carry on. Okay, so I'm just going to show you another video. This is how it benefits the harmer, the offender, and it really explains it well. So I'm just going to show that to you.
I couldn't really even begin to tell you how many crimes I've committed. I was once described as a walking crime wave. I was quite chuffed by that. I've always drunk. I used to love a drink, even as a kid. It was a way of life. I started taking drugs when I was 10. So all of a sudden I looked round and I was sticking needles in myself. I was an heroin addict. I'd stayed in a squat over East London, which I'll describe it to you. It was human waste all over the floor, syringes and empty beer cans everywhere, blood squirted up the wall from the syringes. My bed was an old mattress that we'd found in the dustbin, and my blankets were the clothes I slept in. I stunk to high heaven. That's how I lived. All this time I was taking other drugs, drinking copious amounts of alcohol, committing crime on a daily basis, sometimes on a multi-daily basis, 10 times a day crimes. It depended on how much you earned.
It's about 5 o'clock. I'm in my office, which is in the first floor, and it's time to go to the gym. I go upstairs, and as I walk up to the top landing, I push open the door, and there's a man that I'd never seen before.
He says, "What are you doing? It's my house, what are you doing in here?" And I'll give him some old flannel. I said, "Oh, I live over the road at number 2, and I see someone acting suspiciously, and I heard a funny noise."
And I said, "Where's number 2?
I said, "Over there." But unfortunately, it was over there. And so he knew I was telling lies, and he knew I was a burglar.
He unfortunately ran into a kitchenette that we have on the top floor and shouted "knife." And so I thought, oh, God, now we're in real trouble.
And I had this guy after me, and I didn't get a knife. I got the top of the oven, heavy old thing, cast iron, and I smashed him over there behind me.
Which hurt, but again, I'm pumping, so I don't feel it very much.
He stumbled and we fought. As we fought, we rolled down a flight of stairs, proper John Wayne stuff going on there. And there was a big old flower pot, and I picked it up and smashed him straight over the head with that. And I remember the blood coming out of his head.
And I kept going, and we bundled and fought and bundled and fought. And I got him outside the door, and I said, help me. And it just looked like 2 middle-aged men having a ding-dong. And then the police car came, so obviously someone had called the police.
The police pull up, and I'm nicked in the back of the van.
They said to me, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And they said, "Well, you're bleeding." And as I put my hand behind my head, I've got my whole head is just saturated in blood.
I'm not about to sit there feeling remorseful and sorry. It was just a bad day at the office for me, so I'm off to prison, and oh well, can't wait to get to prison, because get to prison, that means I can get some drugs.
My wife came to collect me in hospital, and as I put the key in the door, I suddenly had a fear that there would be somebody at the other side of the door. And it happened day after day after day after day. And it's not a very nice feeling. You feel scared. So about 2 or 3 weeks later, a police officer called me, and he said that we're conducting a study on a thing called Restorative Justice, where the offender meets the victim. Would you be interested in taking part?
If I'm honest, part of me sort of wanted to say sorry to this fella, but the majority of me only wanted to do the Restorative Justice conference to get out of the cell for an hour. Suddenly this day came, and the prison officer opened my door. It was lunchtime. And he said, "Come on then." I'm walking along this passageway. Whether or not it's true, I don't know, but apparently the screws used to say this was where the condemned man used to go. And at that very moment, I started to feel like a condemned man. I'm thinking, I don't really want to do this. I don't want to go and meet the victims of my crimes. I don't want to meet anyone. I just want to go and lay in my bed. And we get up to the door, and I'm thinking, I don't want to be here. I just don't want to be here. Just as I went to say it, the door opened.
And there is a guy I fought about 2 months earlier, and he's in a sort of prison garb and looking really sheepish. And, I'm beginning to think, what the hell are we doing here? But anyway, it's going to happen. Whatever it is, it's going to happen. So here we go.
So I started going on about the poor old me's and how I've had an hard life, and giving all the social spiel, because all my life that's what I've done, give social spiel to probation officers and social workers. I thought I had everyone eating out the palm of my hands.
He's just going through the movements, just going through the same old lines, the same old trite. And I'm beginning to get very, very annoyed, very, very annoyed.
And it came to a point, and I said to
Will, when we first met. And that's it. And I just lose it completely.
And he started listing all the things that I've done. And he also started listing his feelings.
And it comes out like a fire hydrant, and I said to him, we didn't meet at some bloody cocktail bar in Islington. You broke into my house. You destroyed my one belief that I had, which is my ability to protect my family, my house, from people like you, and you did it in one fell swoop.
I never knew it made people feel sad, angry, bad, depressed, isolated, guilty about things I'd done. I didn't know.
Peter was just, I mean, it was like a train hitting him. You could see that he God, you know, I've done this.
It was like a flow of emotion started coming out, and I never realised it. I just never realised the damage I'd done. I never realised the harms I'd caused. I never realised how many people it affected.
And he was a man who wasn't showing remorse because the lawyer had said, you've got to show remorse, you get time off. He was a man who was genuinely affected by what we had said. And we start conversing, we start talking, and Peter starts talking. He starts talking from his heart, from his real core of his existence.
When you hear the damage, what you have done, when you hear the harm you've caused, you've got to be a very, very bitter and twisted human being if this doesn't affect you. You've got to be a sicko. I was fully expecting these people who I'd done a lot of harm to say, lock him up, give him the birch, throw away the key, we don't care. But I was quite amazed. So I went back to that cell and sat there with all these feelings, you know, and I sat with them for a long time trying to work them out and separate them. And
you can't just leave him there. You've got to help him help himself. So therefore we then went out and said, listen, we want to see you change. We want to see you get yourself together. We want to help you in this process.
We'd like to see him address his alcohol and addiction problems. We'd like to see him address his offending problems. We'd like to see him maybe get some education, and we'd like to see him even get a job when he gets out.
In a court of law, the victim sits in the public gallery. He, she, his family, his loved ones are the most affected by this crime, and then the least involved in the process.
They don't get no input into it, and there's questions that need answering, and they can't possibly answer these questions unless they meet the harmer, the wrongdoer, the villain of the piece, the criminal.
And that's all this is bringing people around. Well, it happened to be a prison table, but I mean, it could be anywhere, and having them saying, well, why did you do that? You know, do you understand how that affected me? Do you understand how that affects other people? Ever since we first met, we continue to meet. We have become, both of us, utter converts to restorative justice, to restorative approaches, to bringing offenders and victims together.
Because of that conference, it initiated change, it implemented change. I implemented the change, but it sort of gave me the kickstart I needed. You know, I can't express gratitude enough for the Restorative Justice Programme.
Okay. So apparently, if a offender goes through the whole restorative justice process, they're 30% less likely to reoffend. Unfortunately, it's not 100% or anywhere near it, but 30% is incredibly significant. And you heard him talk about the fact that he didn't understand the impact on the person that he had harmed. I'm starting to get involved in what's called a violent crime awareness course, where we go into the prison, and if a prisoner has assaulted another prisoner or a prison officer, they go through this course. And it's amazing how they have no idea the impact on, for instance, if they've attacked a prison officer, they have no idea about the impact on the officer's family, and even the ability for the officer to turn up for work the next day. And it's the same for someone, as you heard, who is robbing houses to feed their drug habit. The person's probably insured, they won't pay out of their pocket anyway, therefore, you know, it's just, yeah. So not only does it humanize the offender for the victim, it humanizes the victim for the offender. Now, restorative justice can only be something that I think we as Christians could and should support, in my opinion. And I think there is good biblical reason for this. And of course, that is found in Matthew chapter 18. And I'm going to read those verses to you. It says, if another believer sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. If the other person listens and confesses it, you have won that person back. But if you are unsuccessful, take one or two others with you and go back again, so that everything you say may be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses. If the person still refuses to listen, take your case to the church. Then if he or she won't accept the church's decision, treat that person as a pagan or a corrupt tax collector. I'm hoping you can see how this is related to the process I've been briefly outlining for you in terms of restorative justice. And often we talk about this passage in terms of church discipline. And I think our understanding of that word has changed over the years from its original meaning. Nowadays, discipline has come to mean punishment. It's about the sinner getting their just desserts. It's about correction. It's about education in the sense of, making sure the person has learned their lesson and so on. But actually, what if the focus is about relationships? What if it's still about justice, but that justice is restorative? What if the Matthew 18 process is Jesus establishing a restorative justice approach inside the walls of a church community? So what I want to do just for the last 20-25 minutes at most, maybe 20 minutes, is look at the Matthew 18 restorative justice process. So step one is simple. Go and talk to the person directly and in private. Now, that's simple. However, in your experience, what percentage of people follow through on this step of the process, do you think?
Maybe 30.
Lower, 20.
Even lower. You're right.
20.
I'll go around 10.
Are you talking in terms of church members or the state in general?
I'm talking church members now. So if one church member feels hurt by another one, how often would they, in your experience, go and speak to the person who's hurt them?
1%.
1%.
Right.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I've got no percentage for you. No research has been done on this, but it is very low in my experience. Very low. What do people do rather than go and speak to the person that's offended them? What do they do?
Talk behind their backs.
They talk about it to other people.
Yeah.
They don't go in with the right attitude. They go in to try and change that person without any thought. They feel the hurt and they transfer that hurt to the person.
Yeah, they talk to other people first, and that make it difficult for any negotiation to be done, because the person may head it from wrong angle before if anybody would take steps to go and speak to them. So they don't normally talk directly with them, but they talk to third party.
And do you think, out of interest, whether men behave differently to women in that situation? In what way do men behave differently?
I think men are more conservative. They wouldn't want to open up on things like that.
It depends on the magnitude of the case. If it is a lesser or having less effect on the man, he may keep quiet about it. But if it's strong, having strong impact on the person's life, to tell somebody or discuss with the wife, they may be taking the action, whatever they want to take. If we're supposed to go to police, they will before come to the church.
I think, Adrian, when I was working, if two men had a difference of opinion, they would talk to each other and sort it out.
Yes.
Whereas women would go off and talk to their friends.
Yeah, I've heard people say that in a work context, oh, well, we go and have a right ding dong and we go down the pub afterwards and have a pint.
Yes, absolutely. And it's sorted.
But a good point, Barry. Good point. But then again, Adrian, do you not think this has something to do with culture? Are some of these Western English guys more open to go and do that rather than some of us from different parts of the world. It's the culture.
Peter, you're right, but we don't go for pan. So what's the other means where we Adventists don't go for pan? We don't normally go to pubs. So that kind of way of resolving issue is normally are not adopted by us, to speak.
I understand what you're saying. I'm going to bring in something here, and I'm going to make a slight comparison. Being in the classroom, when a child wrong with another is wrong with another child, they have some disagreement. They really come together very quickly and say sorry. And that's something I admire about, some of these English students. Perhaps in some culture, it's very different. It takes an awful long time to come together. And I think it has something to do with culture in that way.
Peter, all children behave the same way as you are saying. All children don't hold grudge against each other. It's the adults that hold grudge for longer.
Yeah. Well, I'm not talking about children, I'm talking about the whole men, male, cultural, it's just cultural things. Some people, it's not, yeah.
Okay, sorry, message from Walton. Okay.
I saw that one, thank you.
So, my experience, sorry, someone's saying something. In my experience, people don't go and do this. They don't go and speak to the other person directly. They're more likely to complain to others, talk to others about it, and that's how gossip starts. I think sometimes people remain silent inside. And I think this can be a male thing. I hear what Barry says, but men don't share how they're feeling. We don't share how we're feeling. And this whole process involves sharing how you feel. And that kind of moves us into an uncomfortable area. We remain silent, so the hurt starts to fester inside. It may even get to the stage where it explodes. We explode and you get angry, or you may avoid the other person and not even explain it. And all those things in their different ways can lead to a breakdown of relationship between the two parties. Why do you think we don't like confrontation? Because this all comes down to confronting the other person. Who likes confrontation?
Yeah, the word you have used is too strong. Reconciliation can be substituted. If you use confrontation, that will mean going in aggressive way. So if we are through reconciliation process, who would like to take I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, I think by confrontation, I don't mean you're going to go and punch the person. I mean, you're going to confront them with your hurt. But I hear what you're saying. That does sound a little bit aggressive. Yeah. Jibulo?
Yeah, maybe probably another word closely related to what you are saying might be criticism.
Go on.
Yeah. I would say it's very difficult for humans with our human nature to be challenged on our thoughts. It takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of understanding on the benefits of what the other person will be saying about you. And because we have a feeling that we have been challenged and that people, they don't respect us when someone challenges or make a complaint or criticize our actions. So that's kind of something that makes us sometimes to become so defensive. And maybe also the background, our background also have got something that is inherent in us, the way we're shaped, the way we're brought up. also impacts on how we react to such kind of situations.
Absolutely.
Another thing is, you see, the way Bible put this kind of process is contrary to what we human beings expect. The way we expect is rather, if someone offends me, he come and apologize to me, and I will accept or not. That will be, or to give me some sort of respect that he's recognizing that what he has done is wrong. But the Bible says, if someone offends you, you should go to him and make it very, very difficult. That is why I think we are unable to do this, because we feel hurt.
Yeah, interesting observation. So we tend to avoid taking that first step, possibly because we don't want to get shouted at. We don't want people to say, well, who do you think you are? So we want to keep safe, because if we go and, I'm trying not to use the word confront, but if we go and speak to the person, we're putting ourselves in a vulnerable position. Another reason might be that we fear that we're going to be judged when taking a stand. So we don't want to say what we really think for fear of what others will think of us. It's safer to stay quiet rather than risk disapproval. We might fear rejection, so we can be cut off from our social circle because others don't approve of us in some way. They might push us out. We don't want to offend people. We don't want the other person to take offense and then retreat into themselves and perhaps make the matter worse, and then that will lead to a fear of being abandoned. You might, if you're quite self-reflective, fear your own power, so fear of overwhelming, crushing, or scarring the other person. So it's not about powerlessness, but feeling that you might overpower the other person if you go and ask them about the issue. And then, of course, there's the fear of damaged reputation. You won't like me. And we all want to be seen as nice and kind and accommodating, because to a greater or lesser degree, most people, all of us, are probably people pleasers in some way. So is meeting someone always an appropriate thing to do? Is it always appropriate to go and speak to the person who's sinned against you, offended you?
Yes, I mean, my experience is if there is a fallout or a disagreement, how I normally approach it is to pray about it first. And it doesn't mean I'm going to go to the person immediately after we fell out. It may be a week, but certainly once I've prayed, I feel confident that I should go and have a conversation with the person, because that's the best way forward, in my opinion.
Okay, but are there instances where you shouldn't go and speak to the person, where you shouldn't?
Okay.
I think, yes, there are times when you don't know how much damage you've caused, and it's difficult for you to face up that person. So yes, there may be sometimes that it's wise not to confront the person,
especially if the other person
I don't know,
drugs or mentally disturbed. Then it would be wise to have a counsellor who would be understanding and empathetic and neutral in the whole situation.
Yes, there is basic safeguarding issues here. So if the other person is going to harm or continue to abuse you, if the other person is more powerful, so they're in their position of authority, then you have a decision to make. So you would never, for example, expect a wife that's been undergoing domestic abuse to go and confront her abuser. That's not safe. In the restorative justice process, if the offender is not taking any responsibility for their actions, so if we get the offender and the victim together in the same room and the offender's just, well, no, I didn't do it, that's not my, and they're just being defensive and contrary, we wouldn't have a face-to-face meeting.
Yeah.
If the offender is violent, no face-to-face meeting. If there's one case with which I'm involved, the person is an alcoholic, we would want to have the meeting in the morning when they're sober, not in the evening when they're drunk and abusive. There are safeguarding issues. But however, for Jesus, face-to-face meetings are the starting point. Jesus says it should be in private. Why should it be in private? What's the benefits?
That is, I think, is protection of privacy.
So I didn't catch that, Weiss. Asa, which was,
to protect the privacy of the other person, to make him not feel shame or ashamed. Did you get me?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it helps to remove the fear factor that others can bring in, to say, so the others are watching, or there are others present, but also you can actually become yourself, more when it's in private, so to speak.
I think it's reassuring when you deal with the person alone, like if you are dealing with it alone without the involvement of other people. Like when you look at how data is kept, like in this country, they are very strict about who sees whose data. You have to do it with the approval of the other person. So I think it is in line with that they need to keep it where it should be, unless if the third person has been invited and is not just intruding.
Yeah, as Pastor said initially about the safeguarding, after you have completed your assessments and become certain of your safety, then you can go alone without a third party. And also that going alone could help protect the privacy. That is one thing, because if someone finds that you are making a third person become aware of the information maybe he has not approved for you to share out, it can cause some kind of grievances or make the person feel hurt. So that's my contribution.
Okay, so it protects the other person. It protects their dignity. You don't put them on the back foot immediately. Prevents the disagreement spreading. So the way we tend to handle disagreements within a church setting, it means that those disagreements spread out. If you confront the person, if you go to the person in private, you're more likely to get an apology if one is due. Accusing someone in front of others makes them defensive. It might be, and this is surprising how often this is the case, that we've misunderstood the situation or person. There might not have actually been an offence. But also, if you remember about it, the whole restorative justice process humanising both parties, well, this humanises the problem. Because in the same way we can build the offender up into a monster on a smaller scale, we can perhaps do this when the other person, I can't stand them, they're rude and they're disrespectful, and we start to build them up. But if we actually go and speak to them and hear their words and their perspective, then that humanizes them. So I'm just going to flick through the rest of this stuff. What would be an unsatisfactory response if you go and speak to them in private? Well, they won't listen, Jesus says. They refuse to apologize. They refuse to take any responsibility. And so step 2 is to go and take 1 or 2 others. And why did Jesus advise this? Do you think? Well, you've got witnesses. It can help facilitate the discussion. It can help clarify situations. Sometimes you're getting what one party is saying to the other, and as an independent, neutral person, that people are caught up in the situation wouldn't necessarily grasp. Less likely to kick off in terms of aggression and violence even, and you can have a wider perspective on life. If you just have the 2 of you there, that might not work. You might need other people coming in and bringing just that different way of looking at the situation that will diffuse it. What would be your reaction if you were asked to attend such a meeting as one of the witnesses? Would you be looking forward to it?
It's very uncomfortable. Worse if you know both, if you have some relation with both persons in terms of friendship, it's very uncomfortable. It would be.
For sure.
And also,
sorry, go on, Giovanni.
It might be difficult if you know that you don't have the skills.
Yeah.
To stand between the 2 that have offended each other. And instead, sometimes you might know someone who's better positioned to do that work. So it's important for us to know our strengths and our weaknesses, what we can and what we cannot do. Because sometimes you might go up just because I've been called, but fully knowing that I don't know, and I would go and make the situation worse. So it now needs each and every person who has been asked to stand in between to know if they are able or not.
Yes, spot on. But this role isn't for everyone. There's all sorts of fears with doing it. Fear that you're out of your depth. As Peter alluded to, fear that you're going to lose either party as a friend. Is fearing that you're going to be taking sides, you're going to get emotionally involved. You might even fear you're going to be manipulated. In fact, working in the prisons here, so I'm part of the chaplaincy team here in the prison. We were there in a meeting the other day, and one of the prisoners walked through and he shouts at us, "Oh, watch out for this lot in this prison. 96% of them are going to manipulate you." Because sex offenders are very manipulative. And I thought, well, are you one of the 96%? But I didn't get to ask him. And there's also the idea of it taking up a lot of time. So this role is definitely not for everyone. When we run a restorative justice conference, we give people guidelines. We make them sign a covenant, if you like, about how they are going to behave. And I think this is worth bearing in mind. So for witnesses, it's about listening carefully. It's about remembering that a story has 2 sides. It's about not judging, and that is extremely difficult, I think, depending on the situation. So you're not there to decide who is right and wrong, but to reach an agreement. It's about confidentiality. So the idea that you go and see the person on their own so that you don't spread the whole thing out and escalate it. Well, confidentiality still needs to be kicked into place. And it's about empowerment and responsibility. It's their problem to sort out, not yours. When it comes to the restorative justice process, we are called facilitators because we're not bringing about the conclusion to the meeting, the outcome of the meeting. It's the victim and the offender that do that. So guidelines for the victim and offender. So we go through this sort of stuff before the meeting with the people taking part. As I said, it's about being honest, and it's not about being superficial. It's about respecting, and that is difficult, but you need to respect the other party. And it's not easy for the victim to respect the harmer. It's about listening again, and it's about confidentiality. And if a party in a restorative justice conference starts to go against the guidelines, we would stop the meeting, take them out and say, look, you've signed up to this. This is the way you need to behave, follow it. Otherwise, we're going to stop the meeting now. The final step is to tell the church. And what does it tell us that Jesus suggests this? Well, it says that the church is a safe place, or it should be a place where disagreements can be raised and dealt with constructively. It says that where one person hurts, everyone hurts. It says the community as a whole has responsibility for every member of that community. And we don't have time to discuss it, but I was going to ask, do you agree or disagree that healthy relationships are important for the health of the church community? And we might then discuss, are all relationships within a church community healthy? Well, then we could probably go on all night. But it does eventually get to step 3, which is you tell it to the church, and if the person doesn't respond, you go your separate ways. And that is because at some stage, such disagreements can damage the community. And it's something that no one wants to do. But if the disagreement continues, then you need to think about the health of the community. One of the most famous incidences in the Bible, if you've got time to go and read it, will be 1 Corinthians 5, where a guy who had inappropriate relationships was told he could no longer attend the church. Why? Because he was going to damage the community. I'm just going to finish with a couple of texts. One from Matthew 5. Sorry, go on, Jabula.
First, I just want to come in relation to what you have said. I've got a question. In terms of as a church community, and most probably disagreements, they come through in terms of our beliefs and doctrines. Let's say in an event, someone says something that is not within the church beliefs or doctrines, or something that can suggest something that is not in support, or probably that can indicate something that is not in support with our doctrines. Yes, in as much as we probably, the person who have said it and someone who has heard it can discuss about it and agree. How can it be addressed now in terms of the church, like to the church?
Well,
should it be just between those we have discussed, or it should be brought back to the church and corrected, or it's just left as?
How many members do you think agree 100% with the 28 fundamentals? In every detail, every dot, every tittle?
I cannot say the number because I don't know much. But I believe that when one is being baptized, they would agree to the doctrines that are before baptism, like the teachings of the church.
For sure. But the reality is that in any given congregation, there will be a wide range of beliefs. And most church communities will put up with that. Where it becomes an issue is if the community is threatened by the way that that person is pushing their beliefs. So you would continue to, in a normal situation where the person isn't being aggressive with it or isn't being destructive with it, you would continue the dialogue for as long as it takes. But say, I'm trying to think of one that's not Norwich sensitive in the past. So whatever it is, so you're passionate about some weird off script doctrine, but you go around and every time you have a Sabbath school class, this person brings up their strange belief. They're going around and they're soliciting members. They're inviting other people around. Look, this is what you need to believe now. This is the truth. The church is teaching the wrong thing. The elders are, they're apostate, and the conference is apostate. If their behaviour is bearing such fruit, then I think you need to do something about it. But if so there are people that believe all sorts of different things, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is a disciplinary process, in my view, because otherwise we would have no one left in church.
Yes, Pastor, I have a different question. You see, with this kind of reconciliation process of which the Bible has given us some kind of process to follow, it did not tell us whether the other party must agree before you call another people with you to go on the second phase or the second time. Do you have to get the consent of the other party who failed to agree with you before you bring in third party with them, or you go unannounced?
So it's part of your agreement to be a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church that you will submit to church authority. Now that sounds very heavy-handed, but if the leaders of the church come and say to you, look, we need to have this meeting because we need to clear this up, but you simply refuse to have a meeting and then you continue to be disruptive, then you need to handle that.
No, my question is not as a follow-up of Njabulo's question. My question is where we were discussing that we said the first and foremost, you must, if someone offend you, you must go and speak to him. And if the Bible says, if he fails to agree with you, then you take a third party and go with him or her. If he fails to agree, or if any agreement is failed to be established, then you can go to the church. When you are going for the second time with a third party, do you need to seek the individual's consent that I am coming with another party to see if we can address this and get a date and time from them, or you go unannounced?
Okay, so what's your answer to your question?
I have gone, he didn't agree with me. So definitely, if you tell him that you are coming with a third party, not even on your own, he wouldn't agree, he wouldn't accept.
Yeah, that's all part of this process. If they won't, I think personally, I would arrange it in advance and say what is going to happen. If they don't want to go through that process, then the church has a decision to make.
Yeah, I was going to suggest as well, I mean, trying to answer Brother Atta's question. Usually in leadership, you have more than one person. So suppose I'm the one who's dealing with that case and I've spoken to them and they say no to me. I want to think that the other leaders could take this up and perhaps look for somebody who is in good books with that person, so they can have a chat and say, look, this is what we're trying to achieve. We are trying to reach a situation where things are resolved. And I might be left out of the discussion and let those that are being received better by the victim go ahead and discuss it.
George, I understand this point you are making. It hasn't yet reached to the church. Someone has offended me, as the Bible was saying. Someone has offended me. He hasn't gone to the church. He says you have to go and speak to the person first. And if he fails to agree with you, go and take, he hasn't just gone to the church. That is where my worries is. You have to tell him that, oh, you didn't agree with me. May I get time in a date? I need to come with another people to speak to you. This is about me, not the church. It hasn't gone to the church yet. It will get to the church on the third phase.
That's what I was saying, Arthur, that if it's me who has wronged you, then I'll ask Patias to come and speak to you on my behalf and say, look, this man is really sorry about what happened, so give him a chance to come and explain further. You might listen to Patias more than listening to me directly. I don't know if I'm wrong, Adrian, but that's how.
Yeah, it doesn't conform with what the Bible, the teachings of the Bible. What we are saying doesn't conform with what is in the Bible.
Yeah, I mean, this is a messy, see your hand, Jabulo. This is a messy process. I mean, Jesus just lays it out and it just sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Oh, you just do this, and then if that doesn't happen, you just go and do that. And then, oh, then you're fine. No, it is a messy process. But if you are part of a church community, then you have responsibility to that community. And if you don't live up to that responsibility and accountability, then, you know, there is a bigger discussion to have. Jabulo, what did you wanted to say?
Yes, I think if we take it as in terms of literal as it is, then it becomes like this, like a casting stone. So it's a process. And then some within that process, there should be the mind of love, the mind of restoration, the mind of not losing a soul. We should also have a long suffering towards the other brethren. And because sometimes if probably the person who has been offended, sometimes I can be a person who can quickly heal. Then probably the other person, it takes time for him to get to the stage that I will be. So it calls for also patience towards the other brother.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, as Uncle George has said, it's not always the leadership that he has to. Sometimes someone may be tasked through the leadership to talk to the person. Because some of the things that comes is the relationship that this person has with other members. We have to know, and we have to know who the person whom he's likely to listen to. So the relationships in church, was not everyone has got the same relationship with each church member. So we need to know who is so close, who's close to this member, who can talk to him. These are sometimes mistakes that we can make as church leaders, where we think as we are leaders, we have to do things ourselves. But as long as we have accomplished the goal of restoration and bring these two together and not losing the member, then we have achieved the purpose that God has put us in those positions.
So the goal of, and discipline is a horrible word, I don't like it. The goal of church discipline is restoration and reconciliation. It's not punishment. I just want to finish, if I may, and you can ask questions, I guess, afterwards. It's from Matthew 5. If you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar, go and be reconciled to that person, then come and offer your sacrifice to God. In other words, our horizontal relationships affect our vertical relationship. And finally, just one from Colossians, make allowance for each other's faults and forgive anyone who offends you. Remember the Lord forgave you, so you must forgive others. And we haven't even started to unpack the role of forgiveness in this, but we mustn't forget it. Sorry I had too much material, but it's good to hear you discussing it. That's all I think I'll share with you formally today.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions that you'd like to ask Adrian? Yes. Any questions?
Adrian, I understand the system that it's meant to reconcile and all that, and it looks like it's working, because you're talking of 30% cases coming to fruition. So I think that's quite recommendable. But my question is, do you find some of the cases difficult? So you talked of some you are exchanging, you are helping to exchange emails. Is it because it's difficult that they cannot meet face to face, or maybe like Njabulo said, it's a process. It may take time for them to come to be able to meet, or some of the cases it's just they are resolved that way. It's just exchange of emails, and then it dies like that, or it's finished.
Yeah, so it's a bit like what Atta was talking about. Sometimes the offender won't meet the victim, and as it's a voluntary process, then you can't do anything more than that. Sometimes the victim literally just wants a letter of apology, and they don't want to meet the offender. So we try and make it victim-led, but the offender can, and we say in the initial meetings you have with the victim, we'll say to them, just so you know, we can get all the way up to the conference being set and the room being booked and everything, and then the offender will say, no, I'm not coming. And they're not obliged to come.
Okay.
Adrian, I do like I like the other people coming together and try and solve the issue. Yes, women probably are better, more open to go to each other and solve that problem. Do you not think, though, regardless of our status, whether male or female, as Christian, this is something we should be doing more often. I should find it easy to do, because we are connected with Christ. Shouldn't we be doing better, albeit the percentages are low?
Men have been socialized not to share their feelings, because it's not manly, it's not masculine, but it's unhealthy. Now, whether that comes because of our relationship with Jesus, it doesn't always. But I think if we are interested in having healthy relationships, and that's part of loving our neighbor, then we need to start to be comfortable as men sharing what we are feeling, because that relationships will not progress to the next level if we keep things to ourselves.
Yes, one thing I found is if the issue is about the church, it's simple. The church can deal with it. But if it becomes a church member and the other, that is where the problem is, because the one who is hurt, the offender, had done what he did for a reason. It doesn't mean that he just got up and that means he's got mental health problem. So the one that has been offended might have done something that has caused that friction. So when he goes, it really comes to the other party. Sometimes it doesn't come across their mind, because they don't know what caused that person to come and attack them or did what they did to them. So they don't want to go. They want apology from them. And the person also, the funder also thinking, if you are in a good situation, may be thinking how he's getting apology from you or doesn't want to talk to you at all. So if you become one-to-one, rather than from in the instance of the church situation, if it's a church situation, church board can sit down and nominate somebody. But if it is only one person against the other, and he doesn't want to spread it, he doesn't tell the third party as Bible forbidding us not to spread the situation, That is where we got to be very, very careful, because there are a number of people in the church who don't talk. They don't talk. When they finish the church, this one goes this way, that one goes this way, and every day they come. Every day you see them at church, but they don't touch. Sometimes they talk, but inside them they have something against them. So this is the hidden problem that needs to be addressed properly, because that is rare in the church.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it isn't just men, but generally in churches, people just don't get to know each other well enough to open up and talk, and it affects the health of the community. Just to answer George's question, so I've only been doing this for when did I have my training? I had my training in February, March or something, because it was delayed because of COVID. So we only have low-level cases to begin with, and if we move on to say cases of rape or something, we have to go through extra training, and I haven't done that yet. And again, when we were discussing about the fact that not everyone can be a witness or be part of the process in a church setting, not everyone can sit there in the same room as a rapist and act as a neutral facilitator. So that there's a whole other load of training and other stuff that you need to go through. So I'm just in doing assault cases and stuff like that at the moment, minor assault cases.
Any more questions, please, from anyone that you'd like to ask just before we close? Right.
All right.
Turn over to George, please.
Yeah. Yes, I must say this has been an eye-opener for me, and I hope for us all. I didn't know that there was something like that's happening. I'd only heard of, to be honest, the first time I heard of something like that was when the Rwandese, what they call Rwanda, when that happened, and a lot of Adventists were killed in that genocide, and they then formed a commission to try and broker peace, and they were bringing people together. But I didn't realize that there is something like that here. So I'd like to really thank Adrian for bringing us this very informative and educative spiel. And as far as I'm concerned, there's been a lot of benefit there for us, and also it's prepared us to face issues when they come up, and to be able to open up and get some closure, peace of mind. So yeah, thank you for taking the time, Adrian, to speak to us as men, and I hope that we will carry this forward and also try and help our churches wherever we come from to engage in conflict resolution in this manner. So thank you so much, and say thank you to Mel for giving you the food to give you the energy to do what you did.
That's right.